Hi, everybody. I'm Beatty Confredos, and welcome again, my friends, to the Ask Beatty Show. And it's really true how many things that we are actually able to work out in our life if we are serious, if we are honest with ourselves, and if we are actually willing to acknowledge and address and resolve as best as we can, even though we can't change history, the things that continue to get in the way of our life and our relationships. Of course, there are many things that we cannot change. We cannot change the past. We cannot change something that's happened just a couple of days ago. But I think it's really important that we are able to distinguish. And this is why I really love the AA prayer, which, really reminds all of us the things that we can change. There are many, many things that we can change, the things that we can't, and the wisdom for us all to really understand and recognize and know the difference. So, for those of you who may be tuning in and wondering who is Viti Confredos and what is she actually talking about, I am a nationally recognized psychotherapist and a sex therapist and an author of the groundbreaking book on relationships for better, for worse, forever. Discover the path to lasting love. I'm also the advice columnist for dance papers in the Hamptons and New York City and Palm Beach. And I've been a resource in national radio and television for many, many years. But I think of all of the things that I do professionally, and I have to say I'm very fortunate. I love what I do professionally. I think that my private practice in New York City and in East Hampton, treating people directly, adults and children and adolescents of various different ages and stages in life, with every conceivable kind of problem, including depression and anxiety and eating disorders, and of course, domestic violence and marital issues and extramarital affairs and sexual abuse and sexual assault and substance abuse of various different kinds. I mean, I've been practicing now for over 35 years, and I have to say, I have learned a great, great deal from my patients. And I think probably the greatest lessons that I've learned is the lessons of compassion and patience and understanding that many, many people, their beginnings are very, very, very difficult without the love and support that every little child wants and deserves. And of course, if our beginnings, have been extremely dysfunctional, destructive, violent, as many, many of my patients' beginnings have been, it's a lot more challenging. And yet the good news, for 35 years, I've treated thousands and thousands of people. I have learned that there is a process to really help people emotionally work through what did and did not happen in their earlier lives. I mean, not past lives, but in their earlier lives, so that they are really able, once and for all, to be able to live in the moment, without really having one foot in the past and one foot in the present. And what I have really found is a therapist, I mean, people will be contacting me for relationship issues and sexual abuse and sexual assault, and yet how important it is to really be able to go back and help people get to the root of the problem, to understand what did and didn't happen that contributed to their trauma, to their depression, to their anxiety, to their rootlessness. And the process, I have to say, it's not like having a tea party. It's painful. And yet, what I have found is that people have really gained a lot of inner strength and perspective, and despite their histories, with a lot of hard work and, of course, good guidance, are really able to go on and live lives of happiness and also of joy. So that if you're finding that you are stuck, the real question, of course, is what are you planning to do about all of this? We complain and we moan and we whine about the present, about the past, and yet there are many, many steps that we can all take to improve the quality of our lives and our relationships. And statistics are telling us, and the media is telling us, is that people are really struggling in a variety of different ways. In fact, there was an article in Dan's papers, and it happened to be an article on the wellness industry. And in fact, the wellness industry is booming globally, and yet Americans are still really struggling. So, what is all that about? And in my research, what I found is that even without a lot of rigorous peer review on the clinical research of many products, the global consumer, and listen to this, wellness market has risen to over 1.8 trillion, that's trillion dollars. And even without those clinical credentials that would establish some legitimacy to the industry, the wellness market has reached $460 billion in the United States alone. So on the surface, right, it would appear that we would be seeing that Americans are taking greater control of their lives and are feeling happier and have a greater sense of well-being. And yet 58% of US respondents, according to the McKinsey's latest Future of Wellness research, now considers health and wellness a top priority. Now, they consider it to be a top priority in their everyday lives. Generation Z and millennial consumers are purchasing more wellness products. So we are saying this is really a priority in our lives. And the purchasing power is it's amazing. Wellness products and services are being purchased than in previous other generations. I mean, women's health, aging, sleep aids, weight management, in-person fitness and classes and gut health and sexual health and sleep are priority areas that are constantly being talked about and advertised to us. In-home testing kits, biomonitoring, and wearable devices measuring things like blood pressure and glucose levels and insights about sleep and calorie intake and daily, weekly steps taken are only some of the many, many measures that people are taking to monitor their health. So we are doing a lot, or it appears that we are doing a lot. However, what is the reality? So despite all of the wellness advertising and the hype and the products that are currently available, the reality is that Americans are still really, really struggling in many facets of their lives and their health. So I want to cite some of the reality statistics of what's really, really going on in America, despite the booming wellness industry. Now remember, it's a business. It is a business. In fact, as I mentioned, it is a 1.8 trillion business. So what's happening with us here in the United States? Okay, in the United States, obesity, depression, and suicide are significant public health concerns. Obesity rates, despite the talk of exercise and calorie watching, are high, with 42.4% of adults that are considered to be obese and 30.7% who are considered to be overweight. So yes, there's a lot of talk, right, about exercise and monitoring our food intake, and yet let us look at the reality here. 18.5% of adults experience depression, And the United States ranks 29th for depressive disorders globally, according to the Global Burden and Disease Study. I had to do some research here just to make sure that the numbers are accurate, because I want you to know exactly what the reality is about how well, or on the other hand, how badly we're doing in various different facets of our life. And when it comes to depression rates, they have been increasing in the United States, with lifetime and current depression rates hitting new highs in recent years. A 2021 survey indicated that 39.7, and this is a really frightening number, of high school students experience persistent feelings of sadness and hopelessness. And this is despite all of the appearing connection that is going on in social media, which is a whole other subject that I'm going to talk about very, very shortly. A 2022 survey found that 22% of high school students reported seriously considering suicide. 22% of kids. These are kids who are 15, 16, 17, 18, and 10% made actual suicide attempts. Older Americans, and this is an interesting statistic, are among the happiest in the world, while young people under 30 are feeling more lonely, less supported, less free to make life choices, and more stressed and less satisfied with their overall living conditions. Suicide happens to be the 11th leading cause of death in the United States. And suicide is the second leading cause of death for people. And this was a particularly frightening statistic that I found between the ages of 10 and 34. It is the second ages of 10 and 34. In 2022, suicide was the third leading cause of death. And this number really, I have to tell you, this really freaked me out among high school youth between the ages 14 to 18. In 2022, suicide was the second leading cause of death for children ages 10 to 14, and the third leading cause of death of children 15 to 24. And for me, I was once the director of the school social services program for Greater Montreal. Of course, many of you who've been listening to the show now for almost 13 years, you know that I am Canadian. And I started off my career after my master's degree at McGill University, at my graduate training in marriage and family therapy and sexual dysfunction at the Jewish Family Services Psychiatric Center. I was a school social worker, and one of the most important things that schools need to do is that there needs to be early identification and early intervention. I mean, if we're talking about children between the ages of 10 and 14 who are talking about and who are actually committing suicide. And if we're talking about the very, very high depression rates of what we're seeing currently with high school students, to me, it seems that mental health absolutely needs to be a priority in schools. And I understand that the schools can't turn themselves into mental health clinics. And yet there is an agenda that has to be met. The kids have to learn math. They have to learn science. They have to learn history. And yet, what we're seeing, and I think that we have to be more and more and more flexible to look at the reality of what is going on with our students and to subsequently make whatever changes are necessary. And when I was one of the directors of the Greater Montreal School Social Services Program, and also when I was a school social worker, there was a system in place. Every single teacher understood and knew the kinds of symptoms that they needed to look for. If the kids were depressed, if the kids were overly angry, if the kids were not learning. And there was a system where referrals were made on a regular basis, either to the nurse, if there were some concerns about physical health, to the psychologist, if there were concerns about psychoeducational needs for testing, and for the school social worker who was there to really assess what was going on with students. And I remember making dozens and dozens and dozens of home visits to families to get a very, very complete picture of what it is that was going on and not going on with the students in the school. And I look back, and this is many, many years ago, and I'm very, very proud to say that literally no child, or almost no child, was really left behind. We were clued in, we were zeroed in to monitoring not only, how well the kids were going to do on their math tests, but emotional well-being, psychological well-being, mental health was, and certainly these days more and more really needs to be a priority. When I look at these statistics, I mean, who would have ever dreamed that the second leading cause of death for 10 to 14-year-old kids happens to be suicide? And according to the Commonwealth funds, and this is another study in 2023, they report that healthcare system ranks, and this is something that we as Americans, I mean, I have dual citizenship, but I am an American, that the United States healthcare system ranks last among 11 high-income countries. And that the United States, and we're looking again, these are not pretty statistics to be describing, but the truth needs to be told. The United States also ranks last overall with poor health care outcomes, such as high mortality rates and low life expectancy. Are we not the richest country in the world? So what is it exactly that is going on? In fact, it ranked last with a score of 55 out of 100. And apparently, this study compared health systems of 10 countries, including Australia and Canada and France, Germany, the Netherlands, New Zealand, Switzerland, the United Kingdom, and the United States. So what is it that is going on or not going on in America? Do we not really prioritize our citizens and our citizens' physical as well as our citizens' mental health? Apparently, we don't. The United States, if we're talking about divorce, also has the highest divorce rate in the world. And this is a number, of course, that I cite on a regular basis, that the divorce rate for first marriages happens to be 48%. For second marriages, and people are always very surprised to hear this, 67% of couples marrying for the second time end up in the divorce courts. And people are always extraordinarily surprised to hear what happens with people who are marrying 3 or more times. The divorce rate for third marriages in the United States happens to be 71%. The United States also ranks highest, and this is another I find very interesting and depressing statistic, with 71% of respondents admitting to cheating on their spouses. 71% of respondents admitting to cheating on their spouses. And former US Surgeon General Vivek Murthy, he declared, he's no longer our Surgeon General, that there is a loneliness epidemic in the United States. So these are the facts. We have a problem, to say the least. But the real question still remains. What is it that what is it that we can actually do? Not just talk about, not just dream about, not just complain, to improve the quality of our lives and our relationships. And reaching out to what the happiest countries in the world are doing. And that was something that I found very, very interesting. I want to know, when people are doing well and when countries are doing well, what is it exactly that they're doing? What is it exactly that we can learn from the happiest countries in the world, including Finland and Denmark and Iceland and Sweden and the Netherlands. So what did I find? Well, research tells us that these countries, they happen to prioritize factors beyond increasing one's wealth, beyond talking about making more and more money. Instead, what do? They focus on providing citizens with universal. They prioritize mental health. They encourage generosity and trust and a healthy work-life balance and strong social networks and communities. So that is what the happiest countries in the world do. Those are their priorities. And there are also, of course, if we don't happen to live in Finland and Denmark and Iceland and Sweden and Canada, there are also many, many things that we can do on a daily basis. It's not once a year, you know how we'll talk about, we're going to make a New Year's resolution. We're going to change our life come January the 1st. But there are many things that we can actually do on a regular basis, on a daily basis, ideally, to improve the quality of our lives and our relationships. So what are some of these things? And of course, Dr. Gary Null talks about many of these things on a very, very regular basis. So number one, eating a Mediterranean diet, really important. And the studies are clear. They are clear. It's an important diet that we should all incorporate into our lives. Number two, making time for regular exercise, including weight training and yoga and meditation and massage and acupuncture. In fact, I have an article right in front of me here. And there was a study done. In fact, there was a study of over a thousand separate studies that indicate that exercise can be more effective than counseling or medication for depression. And what I would say, it doesn't need to be an either or kind of phenomenon. I think that exercise, whether we are on medication or whether or not we are in counseling or therapy, exercise needs to be something that people are serious about incorporating into their lives, because it really, really makes a difference, not only in terms of our physical health, but also in terms of our emotional and mental health as well. And I found, going through these studies very, very, very interesting. I mean, what it does to the brain, what it does to the hormones, and we don't need to look at it as an alternative. About, how people say, well, one day I should start to exercise. And the years go by. And if we're looking at the obesity figures here in the United States, I think that most of us, we should not wait another day, but come up with a plan to incorporate exercise. And that includes just walking and being conscious of what it is that we are putting into our mouths and our stomachs. And all of this, of course, has to do with asking ourselves on a regular basis, are we being good to ourselves? Am I being good to myself? If I'm drinking, I am not being good to myself. If I am overeating, I am being self-destructive, to at least be mindful about what it is that we are doing and what it is that we are not doing, and what it is that we actually need to do to be good to ourselves so that we're going to be able to improve our life and our relationships. So, what are some of the other things that we ought to think very, very seriously, not just thinking about them, but actually incorporating and doing? Taking a bath or sauna. I don't know about you, but at the end of the day, there is nothing for me like a wonderful bubble bath. I can just sort of lie there in the midst of the bubbles, and I can just catapult myself into any other world that I choose to go into, of course, in my mind. Socializing regularly and consistently, and that doesn't mean on social media. I think that there is nothing as good as the face-to-face connection. And this is something that I'm actually very upset about, what has happened to my New York City practice. Since the pandemic, I would say that over 90%, maybe even weeks, 95% of the patients that I treat no longer want to take the subway or even walk over to my office on the Upper West Side here in New York City. In fact, I have a patient who lives a block away, and I haven't seen her since the pandemic. She wants to Zoom. And all I can tell you, I know that many, many, many therapists and many, many people in the medical profession are doing telehealth. But certainly in my world of psychotherapy and sex therapy, like meeting with people face to face, the telehealth and the Zoom therapy simply, in my view, is not as effective. So if you have an option, and if you're thinking about going into therapy, or even if you are in therapy and if you have been Zooming since the pandemic, think about that face-to-face connection, that face-to-face human connection, where you're able to observe the just the person in an entirely different way than you do looking at them on a screen. So what other things can we actually do? Well, sleeping 8 hours a night. I know that I find that I need to go to sleep, but I've always needed to go to sleep at a relatively early time, probably 10 o'clock. And I've been lucky that I have been a good sleeper, but I'm someone that actually needs about 8 to 10 hours of sleep every single night. And I find that if I don't, for some reason, my mood isn't good, I don't feel that well, and I need to revert back to doing what actually works for me. So instead of being up in the middle of the night looking at videos and looking at clips and sending emails and instant messaging, think about settling down. I think that there needs to be, and I say this to couples all the time, and really for all of us, that there needs to be a beginning of the day. We start our day, and there needs to be an end of the day where we're able to really just wind down and relax and move into a really nice zone without the worries of what's going on politically, to just kind of wind down. And then hopefully you're going to be able to get a good night's sleep. And there are many, many people in countries around the world where napping is something that's just a part of their lifestyle. And for people who do take naps and people who are fortunate to be able to take naps, that too could really make a very, very positive difference. Again, not only in the way we feel physically, but also emotionally and psychologically as well. Of course, and you hear this all the time, and yet I'm not sure whether or not people are really listening. The importance of turning off all our devices. I walk down the streets of New York and I have to be careful because people will literally bump into me because they're on their phones, they're on their computers. We need to, again, there can be a beginning of the day and we're all on the computers and we all are on our phones, but I mean, my goodness, there are times to just close off all of these devices and maybe look out the window. And right now it's really, really beautiful. In fact, today the temperature is in the 70s. The nature outside looks absolutely, absolutely just beautiful. And that can be a real boost for all of us in terms of our mood and in terms of our physical well-being as well. Spending more time with supportive and loving people, and sometimes it means eliminating toxic people. I know that I have a philosophy in my own life, and that philosophy is zero toxicity. Zero toxicity, zero toxicity in terms of foods, and zero toxicity in terms of people. And, sometimes people will say to me, well, an example, this is an extreme example. Well, he only hits me once a year, or we only have violent arguments a couple of times a month. Well, what I say to that, my friends, is that a little bit of poison is poison. And you know what happens with poison? It will kill us. If not today, than tomorrow. So again, how important it is that we look at really how we are living our lives, what we are doing. Are we living lives that are constructive, or are we living lives that are basically destructive, self-destructive, and self-sabotaging? Something else that I find to be really, really helpful, especially if I am in a funk. And yes, I too, like all of you, occasionally get into a funk. The positive visualization and just the positive, just lying down, just in a quiet, quiet place and thinking of something beautiful, just beautiful, whether it's nature, whether it's an event that you went to, whether it's a person, whether it's an interaction that you have had. And it can really take you and catapult you into a very, very lovely, lovely place. But again, it's about taking the time and making the time for ourselves to be doing the things that are really and truly in our best interest. Uh, well, what about dancing? Dancing and listening to music. I grew up with Broadway music and I love, love listening to Broadway music. And I also really love to dance. And if I'm feeling tired or if I'm feeling overwhelmed, really the best thing to do is to turn on some music and just let yourself go. And these are all things that we do actually have control over in our lives. And of course, getting out into nature and looking at the happiest countries, happiest people in the happiest countries, they talk a lot. They talk a lot about getting out into nature. That there's something, and I think you probably all agree, just walking through the park, getting away from the noise of the cars and just the noise of cities can really make us feel so good and so calm. And I think that these days, more than ever, we need to find ways and we need to find vehicles to remain calm, regardless of what is going on in the world. Uh, Keeping a journal, and I don't know how many of you do this or have thought about doing something like this. I mean, ideally, we have people that we can talk to, that we can express our feelings to. And yet sometimes, even if we do, it's actually a really good idea, especially if we're going through some challenging times, to write down our feelings so that we are in touch of what it is that we are feeling and thinking. And in doing that, it gives us some perspective often about what then we should consider doing. Getting a dog. I've always had a dog. I've had a dog from the time that I was a little girl, and there's nothing like it. Yes, it's a big responsibility, and yet, uh, great company. And when my husband and I, when we walk the streets of New York with our dog, with Cha-Cha, invariably we're going to be meeting a lot of people who also have dogs, especially in New York City. It seems like almost everybody has a dog. Of course, I'm overstating that. And it's just a nice way. It gets you outside. You get some exercise. And of course, the dogs love being out, and we get hopefully a lot from our dogs. They give us a lot, and hopefully we give them a lot. But also, it's a way to connect. It's a way to connect with other people. And that is one of the themes that is throughout all of the research. If we're looking at the happiest countries in the world, and the people who are saying that they are experiencing a lot of happiness, is that they talk a lot about connection. And I'm not talking about connection on the computer. Research also tells us that if at times you're going through a difficult time, that support groups can be really helpful during different times in our lives. It's amazing, what can happen when we're with a group of people, where we're able to actually share our feelings with people, and who are then able to share their feelings with us. It makes a really big difference in not feeling so isolated, and not feeling so alone, and in not feeling so shut down. So again, give yourself permission if you're needing that little extra oomph, if you're needing that little extra bit of support. Of course, eliminating sugar, and Gary Null talks about this all the time, and the studies tell us this all the time. And I guess I wonder whether or not most of you, and I really try to eat healthily and to live a healthy lifestyle. I mean, nothing is perfect and no one is perfect, but it is important to eliminate the sugar and the soda. And I've been reading more and more about even a little bit of alcohol is really putting ourselves at risk, not just emotionally, but physically as well. And of course, hopefully none of you are smoking these days, and just eliminating the things that are really destructive and self-destructive and self-sabotaging to your life in a variety of different kinds of ways. And this is one of the things that I ask my patients to do on a very regular basis as they are navigating their own days. And that is, as we're going about our life, to ask yourself the question, is this good for me? Whatever this is. Do we really need that extra quart of ice cream, or do we really need that extra drink? So it's a question of being aware, and it is also an issue of, are you willing to be honest with yourself and self-monitor? how it is that you are living, the people that you are interacting with, the activities that you are engaged with. Are they good for you? And this is, it's a lot to ask of people. We're juggling so many things, with children and concerns about jobs, particularly these days. I've been hearing more and more from my own patients. People are being laid off. So there's a lot of angst, there's a lot of instability right now that people are having to deal with. If we don't prioritize ourselves, if we don't prioritize our physical and mental health, we're really asking for a lot of troubles. And of course, you can't maybe do all the 21 things that, I'm recommending that we consider doing on a daily basis, but at least to begin the process. And this is really, it's self-love, it's self-care. It's being mindful of being good to ourselves. We all deserve to treat ourselves well, to treat ourselves with compassion, to eliminate the people and the things in our life that are not good for us, that are destructive. So this is not an easy task, and yet, it's kind of like, one day at a time that we commit to tackling certain things. And it's amazing that your to-do list, in terms of being good to yourself and taking care of yourself, your list is going to expand. And in its expansion, I promise you that you are going to start to feel better, that you are going to start to feel more empowered with your life, which is, of course, people ask me, so what is your Ask Beatty show all about? Well, the show is really about empowerment, to try to really inspire and motivate you to do the things that are really good for you. No, it's not selfish. It is important. Other things to do that help us to live lives of happiness and joy is, really giving ourselves permission to reach out to trusted friends who can offer you some emotional and human support in return. And I think that people are oftentimes reluctant. A lot of people feel that they need to perform. You'll ask somebody, how are you feeling? And they may have had a horrible, horrible day, but they'd say, oh, everything's great. Everything is wonderful. And of course, we're not going to be revealing our innermost feelings and thoughts to just anybody and to strangers on the street. But hopefully you have at least one person. We don't need dozens of people. At least one person, if you're feeling that you need to talk, if you're feeling that you need that little bit of extra support, that you're able to then reach out. And if by chance you don't have these people, this is where support groups can really be terrific and offer you the kind of human interaction and compassion and support that we really, really all deserve. Other things that I think, and that this has been really probably one of the greatest gifts that I have received from being a psychotherapist, is finding ways to help others that are in need. Haven't you found that if somebody's having a bad time and if you're able to help in some way, I think that we get back so, so, so much in the giving. And I think it's very, very easy that we become just very self-absorbed and narcissistic in our own, endeavors. And yet in the giving, I have always, always found that I have gotten so, so, so much back. And of course, finding that meaningful purpose to get out of bed every single day. And this is something I think at different stages of life, our meaningful purposes may very, very well change. But, let me ask you, do you have every morning when you wake up, is there something meaningful? Do you actually feel that there is a purpose, some purpose? It doesn't really matter what the purpose is, but some purpose, something that's meaningful, that motivates you to get out of bed every single day and start and really and start your day. Other things that the studies are also very clear about is remaining sexually active to connect with your deepest physical needs. And I'll have people say, well, I don't have a partner. And I'll say, well, we all know that we can pleasure ourselves and keep ourselves feeling sexual, whether or not we have a partner or whether or not we don't, because we do not want to find ourselves in a state where we are shut down. And I think a lot of people these days, for many, many, many reasons, are just feeling depressed and shut down. So think about it. And you may want to just experiment a little bit. Maybe you're going to want to buy a vibrator or something and just see how you feel. And of course, if you are someone who has no interest or little interest in sexual exploration, whether it's with a partner or with yourself, um, okay, that's your choice. I'm just, suggesting that feeling sexually alive, and I think most people would agree, it just adds another very special dimension to our lives and to feeling human. Okay. Yes, committing to find ways every single day to maintain a balance between work and fun and to be adventuresome. And this is another thing, I'm just asking yourself, do you feel that there is a balance in your life? And as I'm going through all of these different things that we actually can do and that we can actually incorporate into our lives, I just wonder, how many of these things do you actually do? Whether or not we're talking about getting out into nature or not, being destructive or self-destructive with alcohol or drugs or nicotine or food. um, I wonder, I really wonder, and I'm hoping that those of you who are listening to the show right now, that you can check off all of the things that you are doing that are really in your best interest. And if you find, however, that you're not able to, because in fact you are not being sufficiently good to yourself. Uh, I hope that this segment today will be motivational and inspirational, that you will think about doing maybe even one nice thing for yourself that you perhaps have not done in a very, very, very long time. Maybe it'll mean getting out on a beautiful day like today and taking a walk and smelling the flowers and looking at nature and saying hello to a stranger. All of these little things, they really can make all the difference in the world. So I hope that you are actually on board. And for the final Ask Beatty segment today, I have my usual weekly, how are you doing? And I think it's important not just once a year or twice a year to really check in with yourself, but I ask you to do this every single week. So when it comes to your mental health, how are you doing? Are you generally feeling okay? I mean, we all go through lots of ups and downs. But if you're finding that there are some real blocks, whether or not we're talking about depression or anxiety or substance abuse of various different kinds, or other psychiatric issues that are really getting in the way of your life, in assessing how well you're doing. And hopefully you're doing well. Hopefully you're really on a good path. But if you are listening and you're saying to yourself, I'm just not feeling well. I am not doing well. My question to you, of course, is we can't change yesterday. We can't change 30 seconds ago. But what's the plan? What is the plan? You can actually reach out. You can reach out and ask for help. And in doing so, you can really change the complete. So even though you may not have done this previously, today, tomorrow is something that you can actually begin to do and to take some real concerted action to deal with perhaps your mental health issues. And then, of course, your relationships. And I ask people to do this all the time. I mean, hopefully your relationships are going well. And if they're not going well, again, the question is, what are you planning to do? And I'm not suggesting that you throw away people and that you throw away relationships, but are you willing, if your relationships are not in the place that you would like, are you willing to at least begin to have the conversations, the honest conversations about what you need and want and what's bothering you? And hopefully, you have people in your life, and this includes not just romantic partners or husbands or wives, but friends or colleagues or employers, where you're able to sit down and have really honest conversations about the fact that maybe things aren't working and they haven't been working for a very long time, and to try to find a way to see whether or not problems can once and for all be acknowledged and addressed and resolved as best as possible. And this is such an important thing, because toxic relationships, poisonous relationships, dysfunctional, destructive, self-destructive relationships, the impact, the negative impact that they have on us physically and emotionally and psychologically and psychiatrically. So again, I think it's about really being honest with yourself and taking stock of where you are, whether we're talking about your mental health or whether or not we're talking about your relationships. And of course, your physical health too. Are you doing the best that you could possibly do for yourself in terms of eating and sleeping and exercising? And I know that people have a lot going on. There's a lot going on. And yet, if we don't prioritize ourselves, if we don't take care of our bodies and our minds and our spirituality, it's like we're going to pay. We're going to pay a huge price. So maybe last week when I asked you to take stock of how you're doing, maybe you thought about it and really didn't do much. But as my late father would say, today is a new day. Today is a new day, and you can't change yesterday, but we can certainly change. We can certainly make small changes again, so that we are being good to ourselves, that we are not engaging in destructive or self-destructive behavior. Because what happens if we don't take care of ourselves, and if we don't take care of the people in our life who we love? Look at the consequences that we are then going to have to bear, because it is our avoidance, it is our denial, it is our blame, it is our self-blame and defensiveness. What happens? It continually will keep us in a downward spiral, and then we're going to be asking ourselves, why is it that we're not happier? Why is it that we are not feeling good? And what I have found, in fact, I'd written an article a couple of nights ago on what it's been like to be a therapist for the past 35 years, because people are continually, they're asking me, you've treated all kinds of people. I've treated murderers. I've treated, just people who have every conceivable kind of emotional, psychological, psychiatric problem. And what I have found, and I say this honestly, is that I have great respect and compassion for my patients, because it takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of courage to be willing to deal with our issues. It is so much easier, at least, on a short-term level, to deny and avoid and make excuses, and I'm too busy and I can't change and I'm too old and it's too late, to just kind of continue to go around in circles. And yes, it does take a lot of courage. And yet, really, what are the options? If we don't take care of ourselves, if we don't take care of our relationships, if we do not at least try to live our lives in ways that are really in our best interests, the consequences of these choices can be very dire. I mean, people get sick physically because they're not taking care of themselves mentally, they're not taking care of their physical health. So, what I'm hoping, when I talk about this show being about empowerment, it is about empowering ourselves. And sometimes we need a little bit of help from others, which is why I'm continually saying that it is not a weakness, it is the strength. And if you find you're kind of going around in circles, and the problems that you talked about and the problems that you were experiencing last year, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, are the same kinds of issues that you are continually struggling with, I think that it is a strength to be able to recognize that you may very well need some outside help. I mean, I look at the athletes, I look at what's going on at the French Open, at the tennis tournament, at the the Roland Garros tennis tournament, and the teams that all these professionals have, from the psychologists to the coaches to the training people, so that we don't need to navigate the ups and downs of life on our own. And as I hope that I have been able to convince you, that sometimes the very best thing that we can do is to reach out and get some really good professional help. So where is the time going? It is 3:58. So I want to leave you with my two weekly messages. The first, of course, and this is what the entire show has been about today, just to make sure that you are really being good to yourself. Think about all the different things that you can do, the little changes that you can make, that will be things that can really improve your day-to-day life and the quality of your life and the quality of your relationship. So being good to yourself needs to be a number one priority. And of course, secondly, what's going on in this crazy world today, we need to do a much better job in learning about others, and learning to respect others, and learning to understand others' differences, in learning to at least be willing to dialogue with people who may have diametrically different views about all kinds of things. And in that way, as individuals and as a society, we're going to be able to come together and feel better about ourselves and the world in a variety of different kinds of ways. So we need to treat ourselves better, and we need to be open to actually learning to respect and care for the other as well. So we and I hope that today's show, rest of the day and a good rest of the week. And I'll talk with you next Monday and every Monday here on the Ask Beatty Show and the Progressive Radio Network. So take care, everybody. Bye-bye.